Hello, and welcome to the Balancing Act podcast with SingerLewak, where we teach you about the innovative solutions to help balance your business. Thank you for tuning in. We're glad you're here. In today's episode, you will learn about cybersecurity and the threats that cyber attacks can have on a business. Lara Buitrago, who is a SingerLewak Partner of the Business Solutions Group, is joined by Corey Kaufman, the General Manager for Accent Computer Solutions. Keep listening to learn about the risks that business owners should be aware of and how they can avoid cyber attacks.
Welcome to our current podcast episode on cybersecurity. I feel this is a very important topic where business owners should be educating themselves more. To put it simply, cyber attacks have become increasingly common. We are constantly hearing about businesses, from the large profile companies to small companies, or even organizations in the public sector, such as utility companies, school districts, have been compromised by some sort of successful cyber attack. The reality is most cyber attacks are targeting the small or mid-sized businesses because they are the most vulnerable. I read that according to Accenture's cost of cybercrime study, 43% of cyber attacks are aimed at small businesses, but only 14% are prepared to defend themselves. So while the larger companies have resources and security measures in place, I want to explore what a small to mid-sized business owner can do to mitigate a potential hacking incident or data breach. Today we have Corey Kaufman, who is the General Manager for Accent Computer Solutions. Accent Computer Solutions is a leading provider of information technology, services, and consulting for California-based small and mid-sized businesses, founded in 1987 by Marty Kaufman. What started as one man solving computer problems has grown over the last 35 years into one of the largest and most respected IT companies in California. In September 2022, Accent was acquired by VC3, a leading managed service provider serving municipalities and businesses across North America. Corey has been with Accent since 2009, but has been a strong supporter his entire life. He is a registered practitioner recognized by the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification Accreditation Body and has been helping companies solve their information technology challenges for more than a decade. Corey, thank you so much for spending some time with us on this podcast.
Of course. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate the time. Happy to be here.
Great. So let's just jump right into it. One of the first questions I have, what exactly does cybersecurity mean, and why should business owners be concerned?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. I think when you think cybersecurity, everybody kind of thinks something different. For us, what we really think about with cybersecurity is making sure that your company has a way to realistically prevent as much as possible a cyber breach, but also has a way to detect once a breach is in your environment. So I think a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking about ways that they can prevent cybersecurity incidents, when really we have to start shifting that mindset to how can we detect a breach once it's here versus prevent. You can spend all the money in the world on prevention, but a lot of times you still can't prevent that one little thing from coming through.
So it seems like the top risks of cybersecurity is constantly evolving. What are some of the top 3 risks in today's environment that our business owners should be aware of?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there that people should be aware of. The first is keeping your password protected, right? And so one of the most common themes that's out there right now, and the most common risks, is a bad guy or bad actor finds a way to get your password, and that might be through tricking you with a phishing campaign or some sort of email scam, something like that, where you're tricked into giving away your password. And from there, they're able to kind of log in and watch your email and then expose some of your risk points. And that might be through accessing your email directly and then responding as you, or watching your vendor interactions back and forth, or your bank interactions, that type of thing, and then forging a communication to your bank or your vendor. Really common theme is trying to then change where you might send off that bank wire, right? So they have you change your bank and send money to a different direction. So a couple of things to think about there. The first is multi-factor authentication. Very, very important. right? So especially on your email, because that's one of the most common threats out there right now. The second thing to think about there is internal controls, especially around your finances and around your banking. Those are the most targeted people in the organization. Those that have control over the money obviously have the biggest targets on their back. So absolutely be thinking about multi-factor authentication and definitely be evaluating your internal controls as well.
So let me talk a little bit about this phishing campaign. So I think
Sure.
for the listeners out there, this is something that's actually a bit popular. So these are those strange emails that come to us from Amazon misspelled,
Yep.
saying your password is been compromised and click here to change it.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
just want to confirm that that's what that
That's
is.
exactly, and an even more tricky one today is it'll appear that it's coming from Microsoft directly. So most organizations have Office 365 now for their email, or some sort of Microsoft license that's provided on a subscription month to month type of basis. So it wouldn't seem uncommon if I'm sitting there and I get an email from Microsoft saying, "Hey, we just need you to confirm your password." Right. And as soon as you give away that password, now you've given the keys to the kingdom off to some bad actor who could use that maliciously against you.
And I think what is most scary, Corey, is that somebody is actually perusing your emails and seeing who you're sending emails to get
Mm-hmm.
enough information to send a fraudulent email out that will end
Yep.
up exposing something. And I think that's something important that business owners need to look out for with that.
Yeah. Can I give one tip on that? Just there's a really important piece to this. The first is that multi-factor authentication is how you stop that from happening, right? We all have email on our phones. We all can access email from anywhere at the moment. And what those bad actors will do is they will set up a couple of things. One is they'll set up an automatic forward to an external email box. So when you say they can see that communications, they really can. They're setting up an external forward from your mailbox to, say, their Gmail account or a Yahoo account or some other mailbox. So the idea there is that they can then create a fake mailbox and interject in the middle of that email thread with your bank, with your vendors, with your suppliers. And they really will have the real email thread because they've set it up to forward out to an external mailbox. Then they can do whatever they want with it from there. They can forward it off from a different mailbox and hopefully try and fool somebody into sending them some money.
Wow. And this is where I love the fact that you mentioned internal controls over accounting and
Yep.
financial reporting, because we actually do have a podcast on internal controls for security of the company. If anybody's interested in listening to that, you should be able to find that. And I know one of the things we do, just a little anecdote, is when we're asked to wire money to someone, we actually call the recipient and verbally confirm the banking information. And that's just one of the examples of some internal controls that I have up my sleeve, and I'm always happy to discuss them with anyone to really put the right internal controls in place.
The scams are so very tricky these days, and they all look so very real that eventually one of these things is going to happen, and it's not because people aren't smart about what they're doing. It's just because they are very, very real, and it's very difficult to spot some of the fake ones versus a real email these days. So those internal controls and other controls and measures to help mitigate that risk are very, very important.
I agree. I remember the original phishing emails where your grandson who was stuck in Saudi Arabia needed $400,
Exactly.
and now it's ones that look like they're from Microsoft. So I completely
Exactly.
agree.
Yep.
So with you being a general manager at Accent Computer Solutions, are you getting calls from business owners with concerns for cybersecurity? And kind of, if you could share with us, what are some of the circumstances that you're coming across?
Sure. Yeah. I think we are getting that from a number of different places. So the first one is cybersecurity insurance requirements have shifted. I think the industry is kind of shifting there to where they realize now that maybe they've bit off a little bit more they could chew with these cheap cybersecurity premiums, and so the requirements in order to maintain or get cyber insurance today, that bar has gone up significantly. And so we are getting a lot of calls from business owners saying, My cyber insurance is requiring me to have these 10 things. I can't pronounce 8 of them. Help me figure out what these things are.
Right.
So that's one place where we're seeing that for sure. The second might be that we are receiving a call from an organization that has either experienced a breach or thinks they are experiencing a breach. We're getting a lot of those calls at the moment. The third would be this might be more for us specifically, but we do a lot of work in the Department of Defense supply chain. And in that chain for the government now, they are forcing these requirements, cybersecurity requirements on suppliers. And so the list of things that those organizations have to do is significant. And again, it's a lot of things on that list that people have no idea where to start. And so our specialty is kind of helping them build out that plan to reach that compliance. So those are the three main places where we end up getting that call about cybersecurity.
That's excellent because particularly some of the small to mid-sized business owners, they cannot necessarily hire someone full time, but there are
Exactly.
companies like yours out there who can be there as a resource and help. And I think that's excellent.
Yeah, and just another point on that is the list of requirements on there. Many organizations today are seeing and they understand that one person cannot check all of those boxes anymore. It's simply not possible. It's a lot of risk to have on one IT guy as well to be responsible for all of those cybersecurity checks. So we have a lot of arrangements where we help supplement IT departments. So they still have an IT leader, but we help supplement that cybersecurity and infrastructure management.
With our listeners out there, they're hearing all this and they're thinking, my goodness, where do we start? So what are some immediate changes that our listeners can implement immediately?
Yeah, sure. I would say step number one is implement multi-factor authentication. Even if it's just at a minimum for your Microsoft 365 or Google, if you're using the G Suite or Google Workspace, right? Something like 90 to 95% of security breaches start with a password given away via email. So that's a huge first step. The other thing that I would recommend that people look at outside of foundational things like have a backup, right? Have a backup plan in case something happens. One other thing I'd recommend is they call it endpoint detection and response. And you'll see it this with the term EDR or MDR or XDR. And it's a software that layers on top of your antivirus that sole purpose is to stop the spread of a ransomware attack. So in the past, you would hear all the time about these crypto locker events, right? Someone would click on something, it would encrypt files, and then that would spread all the way through your organization. EDR solution is designed to help mitigate that spread. So it's designed to make sure that that PC is the only thing that's impacted by that encryption event, and it doesn't spread to your servers, to your backups, to the other network resources. That's when really you feel the pain of that event because you can't get to your data, and then you're forced to go look at either backups or, worst case scenario, pay the ransomware in that case.
Oh gosh, a ransomware. My goodness. That
Yeah,
talk about losing some of your assets. That's just
absolutely.
something definitely business owners do not want to get into, or anyone for that matter. And so, to talk about some specifics with the multi-factor authentication, I know personally, I've used it with various banks internally at the firm. And really, it's something very easy where it's a separate app that you download on your phone, and every 30 seconds or 60 seconds, it's changing a code that could be anywhere from 6 to 9 digits, right? So it's something rather
Yep.
easy that a business owner can implement.
Absolutely. And a lot of times it's built into the programs that you already have. Microsoft offers it for free. Google Workspace offers it for free. Like you mentioned, your banking, all of those organizations typically have some sort of multi-factor built in. Now, something to think about as a small business owner is maybe I have 5 or 6 of these different applications, and each of them is going to have their own multi-factor application essentially or process.
That's
Something you might want
confusing.
to it could be, right? Yeah. And so you might want to think about centralizing that into more of a single sign-on type of solution where you have one multi-factor solution that works across multiple different applications.
That makes sense to me. And you
Mhm.
mentioned this endpoint detection and response, and that sounded very, very technical. Is that something a business owner should probably call you to get some help with?
I think so. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd be happy to help them with that. It's once you get in there and you figure it out, it's actually pretty simple, but it's a very sophisticated application and it's a lifesaver for those types of encryption events for sure.
Perfect. I know who to call.
Yeah. Yep.
What are some plans, now that we've talked about some immediate changes, what are some plans that business owners should be making for the future? And I'm not asking you to predict the future, but what are just some long-term plans that a business owner should start thinking about and planning for?
I think the biggest thing that we've been trying to shift focus on for the last year or year and a half is to focus on detection and not so much on prevention. Prevention is still very important, but understand that you are not going to be able to spend enough money to prevent a cyber breach. If somebody wants to attack your organization, eventually they're going to find a hole and find their way in. So it's very important to shift that mindset from we can prevent a cyber attack to we need to be able to detect and mitigate once that breach happens, right? Assume that it's going to happen. The companies that put themselves in a better position have a plan in place to identify that breach and then to also mitigate and remediate from there. So those are the things that are really going to set your business apart in the future. Can't just focus on prevention anymore. You have to focus on detection, mitigation, and remediation.
So yeah, let's talk about detection for a second. Can you talk about that a little more?
Yeah, sure. So your traditional antivirus that probably everybody has running on your PC, in the past it would quarantine something, and if somebody was watching it and running updates and those types of things, it may or may not actually remove it from your systems, but it would only block maybe 15% of actual breaches onto the system or malicious events on your system. This is where that EDR product comes in. Now, if you want to detect a malicious event, let's just say hypothetically you clicked on something and started an encryption event on your PC. What that software would then do is it would take your device off of the network and it would isolate it. And so it can only impact your specific device. The way that encryption software breeds basically is it moves from side to side from your PC to the PC next to you to the server to all of the other network resources. Isolating that with your endpoint detection and response software is step one to identifying that issue. So that's going to trigger off an alert to somebody like me or your IT person. And in order for your PC to get back on the network, it's going to require somebody to allow it back onto the network once that issue has been discovered. I'll give you a quick example. It's very simple. We had a client that downloaded a Chinese translation dictionary, right? And that Chinese dictionary application had a call home function to China, which means that it will go to China to grab an encryption key and come back. And then that's when the encryption event happens. So for that particular incident, they downloaded that Chinese translation dictionary. It took the device offline. It sends us an alert. And we'd reach out to that customer and say, hey, customer, we got something going on this PC. We look at it and we say, this is where the source of that threat is. Okay, we need to delete that application. Deleted, closed up the hole to China, and then that PC is allowed back onto the network. But if we didn't have that tool in place, what would have happened next is it would have reached out, it would have grabbed that encryption key. It might have done it right then. It might have waited for a little while, but eventually it would have encrypted at least that device and maybe more of the network and caused a lot of headache for all of us.
Well, that's definitely the scary part. And I read somewhere, and I don't have a quote, but it said something that it can take companies a long time to realize that they have been attacked.
Absolutely.
And that part was scary because I think it said something like 200 days. Now, this could be a very large, high-profile company, but that to me was a little jarring to read.
Yeah, most likely it's probably not. Well, yes, it could have been a high-profile company, but I think that happens more frequently than any of us want to acknowledge. There is a whole market on the black market, basically, for once we get into an organization, there's a black market for I have access to an organization's network who will pay me the most for that information. Does that make sense?
Yes,
so
it does.
Sometimes when they're sitting there, they're waiting for somebody else who is more interested in your data to pay them to get access to your information, right? So it'll sit for weeks on end sometimes, and then they will pay somebody. Then that bad actor comes in and starts snooping around to start their encryption event or figures out ways to ways to attack you, essentially.
So it's basically this person is not necessarily working for a larger organization. They're working for themselves,
Yeah.
or maybe a small organization that's in the business of selling data to other
Exactly.
bad actors. Wow,
Or
had no
access
idea.
to data. Yeah.
Wow.
It's just quickly, one way that I describe it, these are all crimes of mostly opportunity, right? And not of targeted. Yes, there are targeted cybersecurity attacks, absolutely. But the way that I like to describe it is you're at a movie theater, or let's say you're going to a baseball game, and you're in a stadium parking lot, and really all they're doing is they're walking around and they're grabbing door handles. Whichever one's open is
Sure.
the one that I'm going to go ahead and exploit, right? And so what they do is, now that I've got that door open, they raise a flag and say, who wants to pay me the most to come exploit this door that I have open right here, right? So
Wow,
just
that's a
an
great
interesting way to think
analogy.
about
It
Yeah.
is. That's a great analogy, something we could all relate to.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I definitely wanted to give the listeners out there a taste and kind of just heighten their awareness on this issue. But Corey, before we sign off, was there anything else you wanted to share?
I think if I can just harp back on that multi-factor, and if we can harp on the invest in detection versus just prevention, I think those are the two key points I'd like to get across today.
Right. Those are the takeaways for sure. Well,
Yep.
thank you so much for lending your expertise here. We really appreciate it. Hopefully, our listeners out there can put some new policies and processes in place and engage the right people in the fight against cybercrime. If anyone out there has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Happy to also put you in touch with Corey and his team. But that's all for now.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of The Balancing Act by SingerLewak. We hope you enjoyed the segment and gained some insight on how to keep your business balanced. You can tune in every Thursday morning to gain a sense of balance in this fast-paced business industry. You can listen on SingerLewak.com, YouTube, or anywhere podcasts are available. We'll see you next time.